I'm Chris Carter, and you're listening to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I want to talk to you about the new offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith, and how he's going to incorporate this offense with both the new and the old pieces that have been added to this roster, including some of the things that they did successfully last year. That and a lot more here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 off or $200 back in bonus bets, with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 back in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. First and foremost, hope everyone had a great weekend and a happy Father's Day to all the dads out there, especially to my dad, the best dad in the world. Love you, Pops. But let's get into what today's episode is going to be about. I wanted to focus on the offense. Now, we went through a lot of parts of Arthur Smith's scrum last week, where he talked to all Pittsburgh media last week. And that was interesting. If you want to go back and check that out, go check out that episode. I believe it would have been the Wednesday episode. But I wanted to kind of go over some different elements of this, because part of what Arthur Smith's going to have to do with this offense is, like the scheme. We've talked about, the culture that he's going to have to work with, but also how does his scheme fuse what things the Steelers offense did do well with their players from the end of last season. And I know a lot of people are thinking like, well, the offense did nothing well. Well, let's also remember there were some parts of the offense that did catch on towards the end of the season. And remember, there's also how it works with the old pieces and the new pieces. And some of the key old pieces, Najee Harris, George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, Broderick Jones, and Jaylen Warren. You could also say Isaac Seumalo and James Daniels. But some of the new pieces include Russell Wilson, Zach Frazier, Troy Fautanu, maybe Justin Fields, Cordarrelle Patterson. There's a whole bunch of guys that to move around here. But the point of this new system is to be able to run the ball and build off of that, but also to build off of the success that the Steelers saw in the run game last year. You don't throw away things that you start to develop, especially with a young offense that is looking for its identity. And I think one thing that Arthur Smith is going to do is, especially in the last 7 games when the Steelers offense, got away from Matt Canada, what things did they do well, and how does he incorporate that into his offense? And one of the people that could best speak on that is one of the guys that came up with orchestrating an offense once Matt Canada left, and that was Eddie Faulkner, who's still on the team as the running backs coach. He's been the running backs coach for a few years now, and if you remember, him and Mike Sullivan, the quarterbacks coach, became co-OCs. Mike Sullivan called the plays on game day, but Eddie Faulkner was responsible for setting up the weekly plan and the game plan and how the Steelers were going to go about things. So we got a chance to talk with Eddie Faulkner, and I thought there were some interesting things that he said about how Arthur Smith is working the offense in with some of the things that they've taken into consideration. Here's Eddie Faulkner from Steelers minicamp just last week.
We've heard that there's like a want to use the running backs more in the passing game. How have you kind of helped those guys adapt to what's more to the offense?
I think all these routes and concepts they've done, they're familiar with. So there's not, there's obviously fine-tuning going on in them understanding the new language, but there's not a lot of whether or not they can do it or not. Obviously we'll have a division of labor as things get closer and we get through the Latrobe and that. But, I think all these guys are capable of playing and being dual threats in the run and pass game.
You were the guy that kind of settled down the offense after Matt had to go last year. When Arthur got hired, was there a sitting down and be like, hey, this is how I did things? What kind of conversations did you guys have when he got the job?
Absolutely not. It was all positive. At no point was there any kind of, button heads kind of deal.
But learning from with things that you might, because you've been with this team for a while.
Yeah, I think Arthur leans on that. For everybody who has been, myself, Fredo, Mike Sullivan, guys who've been here, Pat Meyer, guys who've been here, he gives us all the opportunity to talk and give our opinions, and he listens. It's not just, lip service, but he really listens and and gives us the opportunity to be involved. And so it's a really good atmosphere that way.
He's incorporating what you guys know about these guys into what he's already
Absolutely,
doing.
100%.
And we've heard a lot about how this is a physical offense, and it seems like that's what you guys have been building to for years. How ready do you think your room is ready for it?
Oh, they're ready. Oh, they're most definitely ready. They're ready. You know what I mean? So we just got to stay healthy and get to the dance with them both being healthy, and the addition of CP and there's some other young guys in that room, and we're really veterans in the room, I should say, that have come over who showed that they're vets and have really elevated the floor of the room. So it's going to be interesting in the Latrobe how it all shakes out.
How has Najee been in these OTA minicamp? Well, don't hear anything. How's he been just coaching? Everyone talking about the non-fifth-year option.
Yeah.
He seems very energetic in OTAs.
Regular. I mean, I haven't felt anything different, to be totally honest with you.
He still seems like the guy that still wants to be.
Yeah, he's coming to work every day. He's doing what you ask him to do. There's no pushback on anything. I haven't, and I don't know much about any of that stuff that goes on anyway. But as far as in my room and how he is, he's been great on a day-to-day basis, like normal.
So a few things there from Eddie Faulkner, Steelers running back coach. One, I thought it was interesting when I asked the question about how they've started to work together. I think Eddie immediately went defensive because he's like, hey, there was no head button. And I think that's something that he was probably looking for, honestly, and just earnestly, just being like, hey, like, I'm trying to make it clear there was no head butting here. And I kind of wanted to make sure, like, hey, Eddie, I'm not asking that question. What I'm asking the question is, how did he incorporate the stuff that you guys said might have worked? And he went into like, yeah, he leaned on us, especially, the three offensive assistants that stuck around. I guess Mike Sullivan's a fourth, but the main position coaches, Eddie Faulkner and the running backs coach, Pat Meyer and the offensive line coach, and Alfredo Roberts, the tight ends coach. So you got those guys. Then you got the new addition of Tom Arth as the new quarterbacks coach. Mike Sullivan sort of stuck around, but I think it's interesting and good that Arthur Smith is willing to lean on those guys, and he's not just coming in and overriding them and saying, this is now my offense and I'm going to do the thing. And that also matches with what Arthur Smith said in his scrum last week that we played on this, when he talked about, like, ego, you got to throw that out. And he talked about, like, people ask, like, is there a part of like an ego thing where you lost your head coaching job and you're trying to prove something here? And he's like, look, we're just trying to win football games. And I think that's kind of confirming what we heard Arthur Smith say last week. And again, this is just OTAs and mini camp and the early stages of everything. But I think those are good signs for what the Steelers offense is doing. And that's part of what a good coaching staff does, is they lean on each other. They, the offensive coordinator's job is to combine all the strengths of the offense, from the quarterback room, the offensive line, the wide receiver, the tight ends, and mesh everything that they do, what they do best together to get the best result of the offense. Matt Canada clearly struggled with that. Arthur Smith has done that as an offensive coordinator and done it at a high level with what he did with the Titans. Go back and see what he did again when Derrick Henry was, when he bursted onto the scene. I think that's a similar thing that what he's trying to work on with the Steelers. And I think he's going to take into account what talent's already on the team, and how it works in with his system, and also how that, how it worked in with last year's system. Because remember, when Eddie Faulkner took over, last year as the co-offensive coordinator, that's where we kind of saw Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren really take off with the 1-2 running back punch. And this could be where there could be a unique look to the Steelers offense this year, in that it can be both dynamic and unpredictable. Dynamic because this is an athletic offensive line that you can use to get to different levels. We've seen that with the way Broderick Jones can pull, Troy Faltano's athleticism, Isaac Sayamalu, James Daniels, and if Zach Frazier's your starting center, that adds another piece there. But you also have seen it with the 1-2 running back punch, which could be the best 1-2 running back punch in the NFL with Harris and Warren. You still have George Pickens, you still have Pat Freiermuth. If Calvin Oster emerges, you have weapons there. I think there's a lot that can go on there. And the reason I say it's dynamic and unpredictable is because nobody has seen a well-orchestrated Steelers offense in years. And now you're going to have an offense that, if it is well-orchestrated and it's going to be led by Russell Wilson, no one's seen him with this kind of an offense, with this, if this offensive line is dominant. And again, you go back to last year, Eddie Faulkner, we talked about how In the last 10 games of the season, the Steelers were the number 2 rushing offense in the NFL during that stretch, only behind the Ravens. 7 of those games were Eddie Faulkner, kind of reorchestrating the offense and getting it more focused on trying to get to that physical identity. And now you're going to have players who were part of that system last year carrying this forward into this new system, but understanding, hey, this is the plan all along. There's no question about it. There's no debate about it. It's just go out there, hit people, control the line of scrimmage and play this style of football to win games. And that could give the Steelers a much better start this year compared to the past several years we've seen with the Steelers offense. And this could be, I think this is a significant factor in the Steelers' favor that, again, no one's really going to be able to. I think there's a lot of things with this offense that people won't be able to see coming because they just haven't seen it. Heck, we haven't seen it. We're still learning it ourselves and what's going to be the bread and butter of this offense, the counter to the bread and butter. How does the Steelers offense handle different situations? Third and long, third and short, second and mediums. All the different spots that they do. What's their favorite 1st and 10 play that they like to work? What's their favorite way to go to them to play action? Who do they target in play action? Who do they target in the red zone? Darnell Washington, getting worked in a little bit during minicamp. There's a lot of stuff to talk about there, and I think again those are all things that favor Arthur Smith and the Steelers offense and what they'll be able to do. Now, also, if you paid attention to what Eddie Faulkner said when we asked about the running back room and them being ready, he said Najee Harris, he said Jaylen Warren, and then he said CP. And do you know who CP is? That would be Cordarrelle Patterson, the new guy that they signed in free agency. And I thought that was a very interesting part because I've been thinking all along, everyone's talking about what he's going to do in the kick return game, but I think there's going to be a lot more for Cordarrelle Patterson in this offense than what a lot of people assume. We'll get to that next on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you, this show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the number 1 sportsbook in America. Summertime meets baseball, the NBA Finals, and the more that you can bet, you can bet on it all on FanDuel. After the Celtics have won the first 3 games, the Mavericks struck back. So the game is back on Monday, and it's going to be your chance to score big on FanDuel Sportsbook, the number 1 sportsbook in America. The NHL Stanley Cup Finals are also still going, as well as Major League Baseball. And right now, new customers can get $200 back in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet or more. That's, again, $200 that you can get for betting on everything from the NBA Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park in the next Major League Baseball game. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. For new customers, get $200 back in bonus bets if your first bet or $5 or more wins. That's from FanDuel, America's number 1 sportsbook. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our episode here talking about the offense, and this is going to be an all-offensive episode, but I wanted to talk about Cordarrelle Patterson, and we've talked briefly about Cordarrelle Patterson. We've talked about, he could be doing this, and everyone's going to talk about his kick return game and what he's going to contribute there, and rightfully so. The guy's a really good kick returner. He's really good on special teams. He knows what he's going to do, and that is going to be a big part of what he brings for the Steelers, certainly. But don't overlook how he could be contributing to this offense or how he's contributed in past Arthur Smith offenses, because he just came over from the Atlanta Falcons with Arthur Smith. If you remember 2 years ago, Cordarrelle Patterson gave 817 yards from scrimmage in Arthur Smith's offense. That's without special teams. That's just catching and running the ball. The year before that, he gained over 1,100 yards from scrimmage. So he's had extensive experience. Now in his last year with the Falcons, that dropped significantly to 219 yards. And Cordarrelle Patterson, when we got a chance to catch up with him, he had some thoughts about that, but he had some thoughts about other things too. Here's Cordarrelle Patterson talking with us in the Steelers locker room at Steelers minicamp.
Some of the guys were saying that players who played with Arthur Smith prior to have kind of come in here, served as sort of a mentor role or just kind of helping explain things a little bit more. Have you played in that role, and what have you noticed about these guys coming in and doing that?
Honestly, I just feel like Arthur, he went and got all the old guys, so we all the older guys that been with Arthur, me, Prue, Scotty, Van. I mean, we know his system, man. We know Arthur, man. He's a great guy, man, and I'm glad he's here, and I'm glad they gave me the chance, to work with him another year, going on 4 years so Arthur. And I just appreciate everything he did for me over the last 3 years, and I'm just excited to see what happens.
In his offense, you've been used in a versatile set of ways. Was that the conversation you guys had about how you guys can continue to do that here?
I would say the first 2 years we did. Last year we ain't really do nothing for me. So Arthur, he got to get on this year, and find some ways to get me the ball. But nah, man, like I said, I'm excited, man, and I know he got a good plan for me. This season, I'm excited to see what he gonna do for me.
What's it been like learning this offense and everyone else learning this offense?
It's crazy, man, because once the season's over, you try to get away from football, try to erase your mind and everything, and coming back, in this mandatory minicamp, man, just hearing the familiar things, man, it feel good to go to an offense, going on year 12 and stuff you already know.
Cordarrelle, what's your level of conditioning right now?
Level of conditioning?
With another month to go.
Out of a 10?
Out of your own
I'm probably
experience.
a 2 out of 10 right now. But when I get to camp, I'll be an 8 out of 10. When camp's over, I'll be a 10 out of 10. How about that?
Is it usually like that for you?
It's the same every year, man. I mean, I take the same approach, every year, every off season, man. I go in, man. I do my thing. I don't I don't go out and just try to make sure I'm in the best of the shape, because I know when OTAs and camp come, I'm gonna get in the best shape of my life. So I don't go and stress myself out. When I'm away from football, I like to get away, and enjoy my family, do what I need to do, let my body get fat, unhealthy, do what I need to do. And when I come back when I come back from camp, it's go time.
How much weight do you want to lose?
How is it being teammates with Landon Roberts?
I really don't even know Landon Roberts. Never seen that guy in my life. Honestly, I'm not trying to lose anything. No, man. When you feel good, you play good. That's all that matters.
First of all, we apologize for the bleep out that we had to do there, because Cordarrelle Patterson sometimes has colorful language. Also, if you didn't pick up on what happened towards the end there when we kind of turned the camera a little bit, that was a Landon Roberts just coming over to mess with Cordarrelle Patterson. So there's a lot of fun going on in the Steelers locker room. But let's get back into this, because I do see, and the reason I asked what I asked about him being, used in Arthur Smith's offense, I look at Cordarrelle Patterson and I see the Steelers' third running back. That's what I really see in this offense. And not just the third running back. That's not like his restrictive role, but I see the guy who's basically going to be RB3, as well as an extra wide receiver and just an overall offensive utility piece to move around the field. His size, his speed, his quickness, his experience all make for him to be a versatile weapon in Arthur Smith's offense, and one that can be moved around formations a lot. Think about it. When we were talking about a lot last year, a lot of people were calling for the Steelers to go into 2 running back formations and get Jaylen Warren out there with Najee Harris. And that's not mocking them. This is really what was being said. And it's also was the right thing to do. The only concern was if one of them goes down, then that part of the offense is basically out of it. But, 2 running back formations, 2 tight end formations. But what if Cordarrelle Patterson can bring that with either Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, and also kind of just motion out to be wherever you want him in the field? He can go from being a running back that lines up in the shotgun with Russell Wilson to motion into the slot, and all of a sudden now he's a slot receiver, and you got to worry about him going there. He could be a very useful player and a utility piece that can move around the offense and force mismatches and force defenses to have to consider a lot of different things. Go back to the Bengals game when the Steelers played at the end of last year and when they scored a lot of points. And there was a play where Mason Rudolph took a play action, and it was a fake screen to Warren in the backfield. But also, I think Najee Harris was on the field, and the real play was the wheel route to Allen Robinson down the sideline that got the first down. But because the play could have gone to Najee Harris, he took up defenders, and then it could have been a screen to Warren, he took up defenders, and now you add Cordarrelle Patterson to that mix, that you can force defenses to have to honor so many things that eventually it will give, as long as there's protection, it will give the quarterback an obvious read on some of those plays. And that's where I think that versatility from Cordarrelle Patterson can really come in hand for the Steelers and make a big difference. And again, if he's lining up all over the different spots there, it just makes it that much harder to predict what the Steelers are trying to do. And also, let's also look at, if you need to look up Cordarrelle Patterson highlights, that guy runs hard, as does Jaylen Warren, as does Najee Harris. So you're going to have 3 hard runners that can all make plays in the run and the pass and can line up in different spots. And you have an offensive coordinator that's going to love to use them in all these different ways. This can open up a lot for the Steelers, and I don't think that they're even if they don't land their super playmaking wide receiver in a big trade later this offseason. I think this opens the door for this, and this again goes back to the unique look the Steelers can have, both dynamic and unpredictable. That's where I think the Steelers are going with this offense this year. I'm not saying top 10 offense, but I'm saying that these are elements to the offense that can make it easier on itself, to give Russell Wilson easier decisions and to give these players better situations to score big on. Now, again, the offensive line still needs to do its job. It doesn't matter where Cordarrelle Patterson lines up with Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren if there's no blocking. And everyone has been wondering, as far as being a piece of that, what's going on with Steelers first round pick Troy Fautanu. Well, we got to talk to him last week as well. I want to talk about him next here on the show. It's the Locked On Steelers podcast. Your host, Chris Carter, here. Stick with us. We will be right back. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our show here talking about the Steelers offense on a Monday. Let's get into Troy Fautanu, because he's still fitting in. But as we've shown in prior interviews that we've done and just talking to players and even Troy Fautanu himself, Broderick Jones has been a big help to both Fautanu and to Zach Frazier, the center they drafted in the second round, for figuring out what's going on, and he's doing what he can to help. So how has Troy Fautanu received that help? Well, we got to talk to him on Thursday, Troy Fautanu, that is, to see how he took to the rest of minicamp. Here's Troy Fautanu speaking after Steelers minicamp in the Steelers locker room.
How he's done it, and Zach especially understand what it's like to go through day-to-day meetings. Just how has things that he can say helped you just your day-to-day?
Oh yeah, Broderick's very helpful. I mean, when we're all in the meeting room, we're watching clips from practice and stuff like that. Guys are chiming in, telling me like, "Oh, you should do this. You should do this instead of that." So I'm trying to take everything in and make sure that I apply it to whatever I got going on. But yeah, Broderick's been helpful. Dan's been very helpful. Everyone, all the vet guys have been around. You know, I'm trying to soak up as much knowledge as I can to make sure that I'm ready to go.
What have you learned going against TJ and other guys?
To be ready for anything. A guy like that can do power, speed, finesse. He's got it all. So just making sure that I'm ready to go every single play. You don't know what to expect. Of course, you can watch film and see what his tendencies are, but guys like that are super elite, you got to make sure you're ready for whatever they throw at you.
Has anything surprised you so far?
Surprised? Sorry about that.
Has anything surprised you so far?
I mean, going back to the first couple of days, just the speed of the game and how fast people are moving and how fast everything else is moving around you. But I started to acclimate a little bit more and more as the week's going on. So sorry about that.
I know that you do a lot of what college, obviously. Doing more right now through rotation, what's your comfort level in terms of playing on your side?
Yeah, I mean, I could flip to left and be comfortable right away. You know, flipping to right, I wouldn't say it was difficult at first, but just more mental than anything, to be honest. Just flipping the footwork. Most of the things that come with it just take time. So for me, I feel a lot more comfortable than I do first day of rookie minicamp when I got switched to the right side. So just trying to make sure that I'm ready to go. I mean, I was training for it in the off season, just kind of you never know what you're going to play, but it's a lot different when there's a guy in front of you. So.
Troy, do you have an idea going into camp what side you're going to play or how you approach that?
I kind of just leave that up to the coaches. I'm pretty sure I'll be sticking at right, competing for whatever position they may throw at me. So I'm just ready for whatever opportunity lies ahead.
So a few things there from Troy Fautanu, the Steelers' first-round pick. It seems like he is prepping to play the right side, as we've said here on the show since he was drafted, even before he was drafted. The Steelers, and look, he'll play whatever side actually best suits him. But the Steelers are trying to put him at right because that's where they see his talent and his fit is a prototype. And Broderick Jones, that way they can move Broderick Jones to left. But we've also seen clips from Steelers practice of him working on the second team offense at right tackle behind Broderick Jones working the first team offense at right tackle. I still believe the plan is for Fautanu to go to the right, Broderick Jones to go to the left, and that to happen and be the long-term plan for the Steelers offensive line to get back to being in an elite group. And the sooner that happens, the better. And that's not said to disrespect Dan Moore Jr., but these are 2 first-round picks. These are the guys who are supposed to build the future. There's reason to want those guys to get into their groove a bit faster. And if they do get into a groove as 2 first-round picks that are on rookie deals at key positions in the offense, that could be a huge boost to this unit also while it's trying to be unique and dynamic and all the things we've been talking about here. I also thought it was interesting to hear Troy Fautanu talk about him training against TJ Watt and the things he has to go there. And that could be a boost to help him speed up his growth because, if you can make him ready with testing in all these different ways and he's learning how to handle different styles that TJ Watt's throwing at him, those are things that can help him be ready for when it's time to get going in the NFL. The question will be, though, about adjusting his footwork, and being that guy on the right side, because it is a mirroring thing. And heck, we if you remember way back when, we used to interview Kevin Dotson on this show about what it was like to flip from left to right and right to left. And he talked about it's a mental challenge, trying to match your feet and your hands and where they're supposed to go and understand how gaps work and think on your feet really quickly, though that can be a challenge. But it sounds like Troy Fautanu is getting it. And I think one of the things the Steelers loved about Troy Fautanu is that the mental challenges aren't the big problem for him. And I'm not sure that he has a big problem to start with. I think a lot what depends on how Fautanu handles things, because he can feel comfortable about where he's putting his feet in his hands and doing the right things on the right side of the line in OTAs and minicamp. But everything changes when the pad goes on. Everything gets more physical, faster, stronger. And he talked about, the speed is an impact there. I think that's a big part of what the Steelers want to see is how he responds to those challenges when the pads are on, when it's time to hit, and they're trying to drill into him the fundamentals that they need for him to be a premier starting offensive right tackle. I think that he'll get similar treatment as Jones as far as, getting matched up with everybody. And listen, this is the perfect time for the Steelers to try to get these guys, because guess who they're going up against all throughout camp? They're going up against TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig. There's so many ways for the Steelers to challenge these guys and to help them grow faster and learn and have to learn faster to succeed in practice so they can be ready for games. I think that's certainly a big part of what the Steelers are trying to do right now, is trying to get these guys ready to go faster. We'll see how that progresses, in training camp when we get to Latrobe. But by and large, I think that the Steelers offensive line, we've talked about, the potential of both Fautanu and Frazier starting, but even without that, Broderick Jones being a factor there, I think there's a lot to like about what this offense could be in this upcoming 2024 season. And we're going to keep an eye on that all the way through training camp when that gets started. But we have a lot to discuss before we get to training camp. So stay tuned here on the Locked On Steelers podcast throughout your weeks here leading up to training camp in late July. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Thanks for tuning into the Locked On Steelers podcast. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, breaking down your Pittsburgh Steelers. Back tomorrow talking more about your Pittsburgh Steelers on the Locked On Steelers podcast.